I'll go ahead and start at the top of the hour. Everyone ready for the presentation? All right. Thank you everyone for attending today and taking some time out to join us on your busy Friday. Thank you for coming in on time at 2 p.m. and at the start of a presentation for today's SAM.Gov and other requirements webinar presentation. I'm Shundeen Jones. I am the communications manager for Flower Hill Institute, and today I'll be the moderator for our webinar events. Thank you, everyone. We will be going over today a general overview for the MPPEP grant program phase 2, as well as some information regarding SAM.Gov, Grants.gov, and other federal verification ID numbers and registration processes. In addition to introducing and going over the tips and resources available to all USDA grant applicants through the USDA Meat and Poultry Processing Capacity Technical Assistance Program. Today's webinar will be recorded and we will be posting it on the Flower Hill Institute YouTube channel, as well as the Flower Hill Institute MPPTA webinars page at flowerhill.institute/webinars. Today, we will also be conducting a live Q&A session at the end of today's webinar presentation. So if you have any questions throughout the presentation today, please feel free to have them entered in the chat feature below, and we will hold all questions till the end of today's presentation. In addition, we are also hosting office hours if we are not able to get to your question today on September 27th at 2 p.m. Mountain Time, 4 p.m. Eastern. Flower Hill Institute will be hosting and conducting an office hour for the MPPEP phase 2 grant program. And joining us here today, we have Mr. Dave Carter from Flower Hill Institute as our Technical Assistance Provider Director, as well as Colleen Whitehead, MPPTA Technical Assistance and Grants.gov, SAM.Gov Specialist with Flower Hill Institute. Without further ado, Dave.
Shundeen, and I also want to welcome folks to this webinar. I appreciate you tuning in because this is really important. We saw under one of the previous grants, the MCAP grant, particularly here a couple of months ago, that some really good applications did not get submitted because people kind of got hung up on the process of making sure they were registered in Grants.gov and the SAM's registration system. And so we wanted to make sure that we could put together something today that would really help guide people through to make sure that when you get that really good grant application put together, that you can also get it submitted. So I want to give just a little bit of an intro to start off with the grant that is on the table right now. A couple of weeks ago, USDA Rural Development announced that they were committing $123 million into the second phase of the Meat and Poultry Processing Expansion Program grant. Now, this is a grant that offers up to $10 million for construction of processing facilities or expansion. It can be used for new facilities and existing facilities, or 30%. So it's up to 10 million or 30%, whichever is less. There is a broad range of what you can use these funds for. You can use them for construction. You can use it for real estate, for new facilities, for training workers, technical regulatory compliance, and the like. This deadline has an application deadline this grant has an application deadline of essentially midnight, November 22nd, Eastern time. You don't get any bonus points or any extra hours if you're in Mountain or Pacific or Hawaiian time. That is the time that all the grants are due. We did have a webinar on Wednesday, just a couple of days ago, specifically delving into MPPEP Round 2 and the specifics of that grant, how it's going to be scored, the feasibility study requirements, and the like. So you can go on to our website, the link right there, and take a look at that webinar that we did. One of the things, Rob Maddock from the American Meat Science Association really did an excellent job of walking through how those grants get scored. So again, I encourage you to take a look at that if you did not attend that webinar. So here's the deal, is that MPPEP Round 1, you could have submit a written document to your state office. You cannot do it this time. Everything has to go through grants.gov. And so to make sure that you get your application submitted on time, you really need to make sure that you start now on that process, because it can take a few weeks. And if you fail to get all of those steps done, you miss out on the application. So I'm really pleased that Colleen Whitehead, who is a consultant to our team, she specializes in helping folks navigate through the SAM's registration and the grants.gov system. So I am going to turn it over to Colleen now, and she's going to walk us through this process. So go ahead, Colleen.
Okay, thank you, Dave. And just want to kind of review the process with everyone so that you understand kind of where to start and where the flow of information is as you work your way through this process. So for the primary steps, and we'll review each of these in more detail, but just so that you understand that the primary steps are applying for, updating, or verifying your EIN, which is your employer identification number. That is the number that is normally found on your federal tax returns. Registering your entity and requesting a unique entity identification, which is a UEI number, through SAM, which is System for Award Management. You want to complete your registration within SAM.gov, and also you want to obtain your CAGE code. Your CAGE code is Commercial and Government Entities Code. It's assigned by the government to your business based upon the type of business that you operate. You also want to create an account on grants.gov. And then lastly, you want to link your SAM.gov and your grants.gov accounts through login.gov. Basically, login.gov, by creating this link, it transfers the information that's on SAM.gov to grants.gov and kind of pre-populates a lot of the documents and the forms that are required to be completed when you want to apply for a grant. One thing to remember is that you are required to go through these steps. You are required to register in SAM, get your CAGE code, create an account on grants.gov to apply for any federal grant. So it is not unique to the MPPEP. It's not unique to USDA. It's for any federal grant. You need to make sure you have these steps completed and everything in place for you to apply. So what we're going to go through is each of these steps in a little bit more detail so that you can get a better handle on how to start, or if you've already started, what you have left on to complete. So the next slide will talk about verifying or obtaining your EIN if you do not already have it in place. The EIN is primarily required so that you can be paid through your grants. They have to have the EIN in place in order to process payments. So your EIN is required to start the registration process within SAM. Your EIN is usually assigned by the Internal Revenue Service. It's a 9-digit code. Most people already have this in place. It should be on your federal tax returns. If you do not have it, it takes a minimum of 2 weeks to apply and obtain it. So a lot of slides and a lot of parts of this presentation, we're going to be kind of repetitive in the sense of start early. So if you haven't done this, start now. So start working on that process. Next, we're going to talk about the step-by-step instructions. There's a couple links in the webinar slides that you can access. That kind of, the first one is kind of a narrative description that talks about the steps for registering. The second one is a video that kind of walks you through those different areas. One thing to remember is you do have to go through the SAM.gov registration process annually. But once you get it in place, each successive year after that, it's basically just updating and making sure the information is current and accurate. So you want to make sure you get it done you have the registration in place so that whether you're applying for this particular grant or maybe a grant in the future, you've already completed this process, your registration is complete. So first of all, the next step is that you want to, if you can go to the next slide, look at within SAM.Gov, you have to be registered if you want to apply for a grant. Any federal grant, make sure you're registered in SAM.Gov. And when we talk about registration in SAM.Gov, we're talking about two different things. One is validating your entity, and the second is registering your entity. So we'll kind of go back and forth with those two different terms. So this whole process can take up to 3 to 4 weeks. So if you have not started, again, please start this process now so that you can get these pieces in place before you actually complete your application. So any federal agency requires you to be registered within SAM.Gov and Grants.gov. So we want to make sure that everyone who is interested gets this infrastructure, this groundwork done as soon as possible. And just, we know that this grant deadline is November, so it gives you a little bit more time. But if you haven't completed these steps, we want to make sure you start them now and not the beginning of November, which may impact your ability to actually submit your proposal. So within SAM.Gov, you want to do your registration to obtain your UEI, your unique entity identification number. So basically you go to SAM.Gov, you register your entity. There's a link right on the home page to register your entity. This step is the entity validation. You're basically letting the federal government know, this is who I am, this is my business, this is how I exist, okay? So you start by getting your UEI. You will get a 12-character identifier within the system that will identify you within SAM.Gov. Some of you may remember in the past, there was a DUNS number assigned to people. The UEI replaced the DUNS number. So if they're no longer using DUNS numbers, they're using UEI numbers. So within that, you are required to provide documentation of your business, such as a license, articles of incorporation, bank statements. Your documentation must include your legal name, your physical address, your start year, and your state of incorporation. You also designate your e-biz point of contact. And we'll come back to that person because that's a critical person that gets identified in your process. Now, on the SAM.Gov website, there are links to listings of supporting documentation. One piece to remember is you need at least one document that shows your legal name and your physical address. You cannot use a PO box. So you have one document that has your legal business name and your physical address. Then you need another document that also shows your start year and your state of incorporation. That most likely will be your business license, but it can vary. It can be your tax returns. Some people have used utility bills. Just kind of look at your supporting documents, but make sure that you have those 4 key pieces in the documents that you have. Your e-biz point of contact, this is the individual who's setting up the account within SAM.Gov. This is kind of your primary authorized user. They're the administrator for your account. Now, as you go through the process, it will ask you if you want to select Register for All Awards or Financial Assistance Awards only. Please remember to click Register for All Awards. That allows you to apply for any grant, any loan, any procurement opportunities. Maybe there's a contract that's available. The All Awards allows you a lot more flexibility. So that's just a suggestion to remember to select Register for All Awards. So next, the steps to complete your registration and obtain your cage code then come when you get your UEI assigned to you. So you go through all those steps in the previous slide, you're going to get an email. The email will say, here's your assigned UEI, or the email is going to say, we need something different to support the documentation required for your application. So, but once you've completed that, they send you an email with a UEI. You're not done yet. So take that email. That email will then have further information to complete your registration. This is the entity registration phase. So we did the entity validation. Now we're doing the entity registration. So if you have only your UEI, you cannot apply for grants. So remember, you've got to complete this second phase beyond just the UEI. So you'll be required to complete a series of windows, a series of screens that are assertions, representations, and certifications. That's how it's described, within the SAM.Gov system. Basically, you're providing bank information. So for example, if you're awarded a grant, the bank information's in the system. You want to certify that you haven't been convicted of fraud. You want to certify that you've submitted audits. You certify that you comply with all the various federal clauses. You identify who your key primary points of contact are. There's a number of windows that you go through, and it will show you which ones you should respond to or not respond to based upon your business. If you're an international business, there's different things you have to provide versus if you're only US-based business. So after you complete and you go through all of those screens, you'll get to the final screen, which will be a final review of your full business profile. It'll include all of the information you've agreed to, all of the information that you've submitted. Then if it's all correct, you click submit. If there's something within there that you want to back up and correct, now's the time to do it. Go back, change. Maybe you want to change your point of contact. Maybe you typed a bank account number incorrectly. Now's the time to go back and correct it and make sure it's accurate. Then you submit, and then your submission then goes back into the federal system so that your cage code can be validated and provided. Some people will get instructions back saying you failed entity validation. It might be that the tax ID number was wrong. It might be that there was a transcription difference in the name of the business. There'll be some type of error. Those emails will tell you what that error was and ask you to log back into the system and make the corrections. So once you get all of that done, then SAM will then eventually send you another email. This will be your completed registration, and it'll give you a cage code. The cage code is only about 5 digits. It's a small code compared to your UEI, but keep it on file. Make sure you know what it is, because you need both of those numbers to then register your account on Grants.gov, which is our next step. So once you complete this process and you've got your registration complete, you've got your cage code, you're set as far as that first phase. You do need to renew your UEI, your registration on SAM.gov, on an annual basis. SAM.gov will send you your eBiz point of contact. We'll receive emails 60, 90, 15 days prior to when that SAM expires. All you need to do is go back into the system and verify, yes, my information is correct. You then are revalidated for another year. Or maybe you're like, I need to update my name because my business is now an LLC. Maybe you moved and you have a different physical address, and you forgot to update it within SAM.gov. Now would be the time to do that. It is very key to remember to do that prior to it expiring. Because once it expires, you then have to kind of go backwards and migrate all of the information back and forth. Can we go previous slide? Back one more, sorry. So once you've done that, you've got your SAM.Gov renewed. You're aware of that. Bear in mind your cage code will have to be re-verified every 5 years. So your SAM.Gov UEI, that entity validation, is 1 year. Your cage code, which was the entity registration, is every 5 years. But again, you will get emails notifying you of those changes. And also, just so people are aware, because a lot of people don't understand what the cage code is, but the cage code is just a registration system that allows you to do business with the federal government. And in the eyes of the federal government, for example, USDA, if USDA is giving you a federal grant, you are doing business with the federal government. So this cage code validates that relationship and keeps the system updated as far as your status. Okay, so the next one is the eBiz point of contact. So that was the person you identified within SAM.Gov. So you've gone through all those steps, you've got your cage code, you have your UEI. Now you go over to Grants.gov. It's important that the eBiz point of contact, that person in your SAM.Gov account, that person registers the new account within Grants.gov. And that person, by doing that registration, that person is what's called an authorized organization representative. You have that person becomes, and within Grants.gov, you have both a standard AOR and an expanded AOR. The eBiz point of contact individual, once they set up that account, they are an expanded AOR. They are the only individual that can change your organization details, change your SAM.Gov account. They are the ones that can assign roles within the system. If you have a business in which you have, 2 other people that you want to allow access to your account, your eBiz point of contact, who is your expanded AOR, is the individual that would be able to assign those responsibilities. For example, if you're working with a grant writer and you want that grant writer to have the ability to submit a grant on your behalf, you would have your expanded AOR, your eBiz point of contact person. They could assign that individual standard AOR responsibilities. They could then submit the grant on your behalf. But you have to be an AOR, you have to have that designation in order to actually submit the grant. Within Grants.gov, you will have to do yet another username and password. Something that has caused some issues in the past with other individuals is the password. It's quite lengthy, so remember to write it down. You also cannot use words. So it has to be a combination of letters, symbols, and numbers. It cannot be words. So just bear that in mind as you do that. So once you are registered and you've got yourself set up on Grants.gov, you basically would search for a funding opportunity. And within the Grants.gov homepage, there are search bars. You can just enter MPPEP and the grant will come up as far as a potential grant opportunity. When you click on the grant opportunity, you can set up a workspace. You do that by clicking on the quote apply button. Now, when you get to this stage and you see the grant opportunity, and you see the apply button. If the apply button is gray, that means there was an error in the process and you need to back up and make sure everything's been completed within SAM.Gov and with your assignment of role within the system. If the apply button is red, you can move forward with applying for the grant. And basically, when you click on the apply, it will open up a new window for you to create a workspace. That workspace will have all of the forms that are required by that particular grant. So if you're applying for the MPPEP, you'll pull up the opportunity, you'll pull up the workspace, you create the workspace, and it'll give you a list of all those forms that are listed in the RFA. You can then click on each of those forms. You can either download them or you can work on them online. One thing that people often ask about is because the system will automatically ask you, would you like to lock the form or would you like to unlock the form? Basically, what that's referring to is if you have a business that has multiple people with access to your Grants.gov account, as far as working on different grants, locking the form prevents anyone from changing the form based on the data you have already entered. If you unlock the form, that means someone else can come in and work on the form with you or change the form. So it has no bearing if you are just an individual and you only have one user and you're the one who's going to take everything from A to Z. But if you're a larger business with multiple people accessing your Grants.gov account, that's when you should think about whether or not you want to keep your forms locked or unlocked. So I know that's been asked in the past, so I just want to make sure we clarify that one. So once you go through and you work on your workspace, you complete each of these forms, the system will show a green check mark. Whether the form, it's not saying it's the information submitted, it's just saying that you have complied with the requirements. So you'll get a series of green check marks after you've completed all the forms. At that point, you can review the application and then you can submit the application. Once you submit the application, you will then get a series of emails from Grants.gov. One just stating that you submitted, that should come pretty immediate. You'll get another one that it's been validated. You'll get another one when USDA pulls your grant and pulls it into their system. So there will be a series of emails that will come out. And again, they're going to go to whomever was designated as your AOR. So that's the individual who submitted the grant. That's who's going to get those emails as far as the validation. So for the next one, just want to talk about, we've been stressing the eBiz point of contact. Just be mindful of who you are appointing for that role. Just something to be aware of, because this person must register your account on Grants.gov. When you register on SAM.gov, remember to spell your business name exactly how it is shown on your business documents. If your business is ABC Processors, make sure you put ABC Processors. If it's ABC Processors LLC, make sure you put all of that. If the ABC is capital versus lowercase, make sure you do it exactly. One thing that I often tell people is when you're at this initial phase, when you're just submitting for your validation, you are most likely talking to a computer. The computer is going to look to make sure everything matches exactly. If it does not match exactly, your registration will be kicked back and you'll get an email saying, please resubmit your information. So mention again, once you have your UEI, you are not done. Keep going. Don't forget to complete your registration within SAM.gov and make sure you get your cage code. Also, you are required to have a physical address. The system will not recognize a PO box. So make sure that you're utilizing a physical address. Some people have done a DBA, doing business as, and they have used their home address because that's where they keep their, personal records. That's where their business files are. So that's their quote physical address, but they do a DBA with the PO box. But you must have a physical address to be able to register within the system. Important to note that if you are a sole proprietor, you still have to go through this process. You still have to register on SAM.Gov because Grants.gov, most grants will not recognize individual applicants. They will only recognize organizational applicants. Even if you are a sole proprietor, you are an organization if you go through this registration process. You get your UEI, you get your cage code within Grants.gov, you are then an organization who was applying for that particular funding opportunity. So finally, just want to give you some tips, key points to remember. And that is, again, remember to start early. If you have not started this process, please start the process now, get it moving, get yourself in the system so that you can work out any kinks along the process. Also, be patient. You're working with a federal system, and often each of these steps may take 7 to 10 days. So you may take 7 to 10 days to get your UEI, another 7 to 10 days to get your cage code. So remember to be patient as you're working through that process. Both systems will email you quite often along that process. So remember to check your email often. Also remember to check your spam folder just to make sure, because quite often those validation emails is how you get to the next step in the process. So please remember to check your email. Flower Hill Insitute has a great team of people who are available to help you through this process, whether it's the SAM.gov process, the Grants.gov process, just navigating all of these steps within the process, because it can be overwhelming. We acknowledge that. That's why we're here to help. So please, if you need assistance, just let us know. You can submit a technical assistance request. We've also included the phone numbers to get in touch with SAM.gov and Grants.gov if you have any questions as you are navigating those websites. So I think at this point, I will hand it back over to Dave. I know that we are available for questions, so we can do some questions after we get further through the slides. Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen. That was really, really helpful. So we'll do a little bit of a handoff here if I can. See if I can. So we just want to finish up just a couple minutes here. We've covered this in some of our previous webinars, but the Meat and Poultry Processing Technical Assistance Program is a great no-cost resource to help you through this process. Colleen is one aspect of it. She's there to help you with the SAM's registration, Grants.gov, but the other members of our team are there to help you with all other aspects. So applying for technical assistance gets you access to technical experts from across the industry, from the organizations we have. We have really content. We've fielded more than 900 requests for technical assistance since we began last March, and it's a real diverse. There are some folks that are just wanting to develop small projects, a small retail project in their own community. Others are trying to develop a regional brand or go into a national market. So we're here to help you with everything from assistance to navigating the grant application and award process, to developing your business plan, to designing your facilities, to putting together your marketing, helping you with your supply chain and the like. It's a great resource that's available. In the organizations that are involved, Flower Hill, we have the agreement with AMS to coordinate this, but the other members of the network include the American Association of Meat Processors. AMP is the largest organization of meat processing in the US, but it does not represent the large meat processors, represents everyone else. Great resource. The American Meat Science Association and the Agricultural Utilization Research Institute are two entities that really help us develop new uses, new markets, new opportunities for not only meat, but for everything that comes out of those plants, byproducts as well. The Intertribal Agricultural Council has a great network of technical resource assistance providers in a full range of areas that they've brought to the table to help with the meat and poultry processing assistance. The Niche Meat Processing Assistance Network, NPAN, out of Oregon State University. A lot of processors are very familiar with the work that they've done through the years to help smaller processors. And then Tuskegee University is helping us to reach out to HBCUs and historically underserved producers to make sure that they have access. So there's a lot of expertise within the network. As Colleen said, the first step is just submit a request. Just go on, you can use that QR code, you can go to that link. The request takes all of 5 minutes to submit, lets us know who you are, where you're at, what are you doing, what are you trying to do, what are some of your needs. We try and get back to you within 24 hours. And what we'll generally do is send you an email saying, can you give us a little bit more information on what you need for this? Or here is a link to the RFA. Here's a link to the guide for feasibility studies. But the main thing we want to do is connect you with a technical assistance provider that is best equipped to work with you at whatever phase of the project you're at. So please, this is no cost to you. This is an investment the USDA has made to provide this kind of assistance. So with that, I know, Colleen, that we've got some questions that have come up. So let's I'll throw them to you, and you can respond. So Brennan is asking, if you're forming a new entity with a new tax ID, how long should you wait before doing this process?
I would do it as soon as you obtain that new tax ID number. Start the process right away, so then you've got it done and completed and in place prior to any future grant opportunities coming up.
Stephanie is asking, we used a third party to receive the last grant we got in 2021. Well, we no longer want to use the third party for this grant. Do I need to apply for a new SAM, or can I use the one we had done but change the contact to me?
So just to clarify, the third party applied for the grant, but it was for your business. So I will assume that. And the SAM or the UEI is specific to the business. It's not specific to a person. So as long as that UEI, your SAM.Gov registration, is your business name, you can go in, and there's a specific letter within the SAM.Gov system that allows you to change your system administrator. So if the name is what you want to change, but the UEI, your SAM registration, all of that is current and existing, then all you want to do is change your system administrator. And so you could change, if you want to make yourself, Stephanie, the system administrator, then you just submit this letter and you go through that process to change that person. So it is possible.
Right. Tony is asking, we're already set up with the SAM.gov and registered with a cage code, However, we went through the process to work with FEMA. Are we able to use the same business entity to apply for the MPEP? Or are there further steps that need to be taken?
Again, the SAM.Gov, cage code, the UEI, that is your business. So you would use that same business entity information to apply for any grant that you may be interested in. So you could use that information to apply for USDA, for FEMA. Maybe you're going to apply for something through CDC. You know, whomever you apply for, you use that same business entity information.
Carol is asking, and I'll just say for those of you that are looking for grant writing consulting, Carol is listed in our resource directory online at Flower Hill. Carol says, I'm a grant writer consultant. I have a SAM.Gov account under my business name. It sounds like the eBiz point of contact is not me, that it should be someone at my client's firm. Is that correct? And then they need to assign me a standard AOR. So if I have 3 clients, each one assigns me as an AOR. Where do I see the application grant space on each of the grants.gov sites? So there's a couple of questions embedded in there, Colleen.
Okay. So, yes, you can have each business assign you as a standard AOR for their business. And then the different applications or grants are going to be different workspaces. So if you are working with 3 different clients with 3 different AORs, I would suggest you have 3 different passwords. And then when you're logging in to that grants.gov under that assigned AOR responsibility, you would just then go to the workspace and it should be that individual application. And we can do,
So,
I have worked with Carol in the past, so we could do some test runs if you wanted to see if that would work.
right. Yeah, and Carol asked on down, yeah, system administrator, you just mentioned the same as the eBiz point of contact. So yeah, I think you're going through that very well. Carol also says Colleen is always awesome as always. Looking forward to working with you again. Stephen says, thank you so much for the presentation. Excited to share this information with others. And Tony says, thanks, Colleen. So those are, yeah, some great shout outs on this. And again, anyone that's on the webinar, please direct other folks. This will be on our website. They can download it. They can listen to it. They can contact us with other follow-up questions. We'll get back to you as quick as we can. So I think if there are no other questions coming in, here's my contact information as well as Colleen's. And again, we just want to thank everyone for joining us today. We hope this has been helpful. And again, please contact us for technical assistance. We're here to help you all the way through the process. So with that, I will say thank you. And I think we're all wrapped up unless you have any last words, Colleen.
No, I don't. Thank you to everyone who participated. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. We're here to help.
Great.
We have one
Sean
last
Dean,
minute question, if
Yep.
we can just get that answered real quick. Can you list 2 people as an AOR?
You have an expanded AOR and you have a standard AOR. Usually you have one expanded AOR and you can have as many standard AORs as you want. The expanded AOR role within grants.gov is basically the quote administrator of the grants.gov account, but they can assign as many standard AORs as your business chooses to have.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks for catching that, Nikki. And now I'll throw it back to Shandine because the last question here is when will this be uploaded? So Shandine, you're best able to handle that.
Yeah, of course. Yes, today's webinar was recorded, and I will have today's webinar edited and published on the Flower Hill Institute website at flowerhill.institute/webinars by the end of today. If anyone wants us to reach out directly to them to send them the link as soon as it's out, please feel free to reach out to the USDA TA at flowerhill.institute email account, and we'll have that shared with you directly. With that, thank you for closing, Dave. Thank you, Dave and Colleen, for today's presentation. Thank you, everyone, for attending today's afternoon on a Friday webinar session. But yeah, great job, guys.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
everyone.